I'm going to tell you a story about Paul Auster, the great novelist, a guy who I had hoped to have on the Novelist Spotlight podcast. I called to see if I could get him on the program. Actually, I didn't call, I wrote. And his assistant told me that, well, unfortunately, he's battling cancer right now, going through chemo. But when he recovers, he'll probably be glad to come on the program. I've read a bunch of Paul Auster's work. It's great stuff. He's got 30 plus novels, and I've read probably half of them. Now, I kept checking in, figuring that once he gets on the other side of the chemo, and he gets a clean bill of health, I'd get him on the program. Unfortunately, Paul died from the cancer. So I went to his person and said, is there somebody, a Paul Auster expert, somebody who knew him, knows his work thoroughly, who I could have on the program and do an in memoriam sort of thing? And I was directed to I.B. Siegenfeldt. She's a Danish professor of literature out there in Scandinavia. And in fact, she wrote, she had a bunch of conversations with Paul and wrote a book titled A Life in Words, which was really an analysis of all of his different writing at the time, which covered close to 30 books by that point. And so I did get her to come on the program and talk about Paul Auster. That's episode number 170 of the Novelist Spotlight podcast. Paul Auster was a very famous novelist here in the United States, but he was a rock star in Europe, particularly in France. And if you don't know Paul Auster, in fact, a woman in my yoga class who listened to the podcast about him went out and bought one of his books and said, I'm going to be reading a lot of Paul Auster. He's a perfect author for me. The way he writes, it's right in my channel. It might be in yours too. If you don't know anything about Paul Auster, or even if you do know, then you probably would like to hear this. But if you don't know anything about Paul Auster, this is a great opportunity to get acquainted with him and just discover for yourself, as I did, what great work he did. So, episode number 170 of the Novelist Spotlight podcast. I hope you check it out and become every bit the Paul Auster fan that I became.